Wednesday feels like an eternity ago. When I woke up that morning at about 5:30, my husband said, "Good news from Georgia." And I said to him, "You see, there is a God. There is. It was this rabbi's I told you so moment after 25 years of marriage and not being able to convince my atheist husband that there is a God. To be clear, it's not that I thought that God was literally behind the events of Georgia, but I do believe that there is something about the universe bending towards the arc of justice, which reflects a divine power, which manifests the divine forces of redemption that I believe are part of the fabric of our existence. Later in the day, watching the breach and invasion of the Capitol building, I moved into shock and horror. We all saw it, the world watched, a violent mob, shattering windows, people climbing walls. One hand had his boots up on Nancy Pelosi's desk. There were those in the mob who took selfies, proud of their invasion. And this in the people's house, the house desecrated. And now we know this was an act of terror. Bombs were planted. 5 people died on that day, including a police officer, trying to do his job without proper support. The God of redemption nowhere to be seen. But then, some hours later, members of Congress, the very people who had been terrorized, returned to the Capitol that same night, to resume counting the electoral votes from the November election, a process that leaders on both sides of the aisle said would not be derailed because of the siege. That, to me, again, revealed the redemption that is part of the fabric of existence. And there we were watching between the hope and the horror, between inspiration and despair, between the fabric of life and the terrible tearing of that fabric. It seems to me that the poles of existence right now are so extreme, the hope and the despair, the hope of a new president-elect who will be inhabiting the White House in 12 days. Count them, 12 days, and the fear of violence along the way. The hope of a vaccine and the count of people dying from COVID, over 4,000 people in the US every single day. How do we live between these two poles? As Rabbi Ingber began at the beginning of tonight's service, we keep saying to ourselves, echoing the beginning of the book of Lamentations, written after the desecration and destruction of the first temple in 586 BCE. How could this be? How indeed? It's right here in our Torah portion, the beginning of Exodus, in our people's sacred text, the hope and the horror, the two poles. The book begins with a threatened, all-powerful, all-fragile leader, Pharaoh, and the pain of an exploited, enslaved people. The more he tried to weaken them, the more they multiply, and the more scared he becomes. So he initiates a campaign to destroy their children, to eliminate their future and ensure his. That's when the women walk in. The women that Maya wrote her beautiful poem about. And I promise you, we did not coordinate before tonight's service. The women pave the road leading to redemption. They walk into the heart of a society that enslaves and kills babies. And they pave the way to redemption with hope. They manifest hope, and that help, well, it saves lives. This is our story. It begins with women who find hope in horror. I need these women. I think we need these women. They can, I believe, show us a path to redemption when everything looks like despair. There are 2 stories tonight that I want to focus on. The first is the story of the midwives, Shifra and Pua. Pharaoh, the all-powerful ruler, says to the two midwives, when you help the Hebrew women give birth, see the supporting stones, or the birth stool, some think. If he be a son, put him to death. If she be a daughter, she may live. Vayomer, b'yeldchen et ha'ivriot, u'ri'iten al ha'avanim, im benhu v'hamiten oto, v'im bati v'chaya. Pharaoh's is a strange kind of discrimination. Kill the boys because they're a physical threat. But the girls, no problem, keep them alive. His lack of recognition of female power ultimately spells his own undoing. Here's what happens. But the midwives held God in awe and did not do as the king of Egypt had spoken to them. They let the children live. Vatirena hamiyaldot et ha'elohim, v'lo asu kasher diber alehen melech Mitzrayim, v'tichiena et ha'yeladim. These women were on the side of life and the divine. They lived in awe. They gave life to children, not death. Indeed, they are the opposite of Pharaoh. Pharaoh, seeing that his command is not being followed, calls Shifra and Pua into his palace and says, why have you done this thing? You've let the children live. Madua asiten hadavar hazeh v'tichiena et hayeladim. And the midwives then tell a most beautiful lie. And the midwives said unto Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively. Before the midwives come to them, they have given birth. Ki lo chanashim hamitzriyot ha'ivriot, ki chayot hena. B'terem tavo alehen amiyaledet vayaladu. The Hebrew women are not as the Egyptians. They are chayot. They are alive. The word is used 4 times in this story. Alive, life, alive, life. Pharaoh rules over a cult of death, but the midwives are ruled by life itself. Chayot can also mean animals. Maybe Pharaoh believed their exquisite lie because it played right into his prejudices. The Hebrew women to him are not fully human. They're out of his control, like animals, representing his worst fears of chaos, a disordering of his carefully controlled universe, birth out of control. Pharaoh's plan foiled, his resolve strengthens. The all-powerful, all-fragile ruler gives up on the midwives and instead issues this edict to his people. Every son that is born you shall cast into the river, and every daughter you shall save alive. Hope born and horror intensifies. The cult of death strengthens. And then in the midst of the story in which babies are being drowned, into the heart of this death cult walk more women, daughters, the very daughters Pharaoh did not think to kill. A man of Levi marries a daughter of Levi, and she gives birth to a male child. His mother sees that the baby is good. V'tereh oto ki tofu. She sees that he is good, just as God sees that the world that God created is good. At the beginning of Genesis, she has the courage to see her children as good, as her child is good, even though all around her, the ruling powers see him as a rejected other to be destroyed. And so she hides him, closets life away to save him, because it is life itself that is forbidden in the Pharaoh's realm. And when she can no longer hide him, the Midrash tells us that his cries were too loud. She places him in an ark by the reeds on the river's bank. One can only imagine a mother's pain at that moment. But in comes her older daughter, who turns horror into hope. And his sisters stood afar off to know what would be done to him. V'tetatzav achoto mirachok l'de'ah ma ya'aseh lo. His sister stands and watches. She witnesses the horror unfolding. She's waiting for hope to show itself, for the right moment to step in. And what she sees is another daughter, a daughter from across enemy lines, the daughter of Pharaoh opening the ark, beholding a crying baby. And this daughter, although she is from the family of the Pharaoh, shows a deep compassion, though she understands that this is a Hebrew baby. Moses' sister sees a softening, sees compassion on the face of the daughter of Pharaoh. She steps in at that moment and provides a plan to sustain life. She tells Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call you a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you?" Oh my, what brilliance. Not only does she provide a plan for the baby's survival, she reunites her abandoned baby brother with his mother. A more brilliant plan than this, I cannot imagine. And it gets better, even better. And she said, and Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse it for me." She says this to Moses' mother, "and I will give you your wages." And the woman took the child and nursed it. Not only does Moses' sister reunite her baby brother with her mother, she arranges things so that a Hebrew slave is paid for nursing her own child. This level of redemption we have not yet reached. And when these two stories, I want you to consider the nature of hope and horror. I confess, and I don't know if all of you feel like this, but sometimes I feel like despair is easier than hope. And the spectacle of horror, also easier than hope. Because horror at a distance, and certainly on a screen, leaves us helpless spectators. Often an outsized outrage takes us over that goes absolutely nowhere. I am at my weakest when I am a spectator sunk in despair, watching helplessly, when I feel trapped either by global events or, for that matter, in my own life. When I become a spectator, watching what sometimes feels like the dark horror of my own life as if it weren't mine, I couldn't be weaker. But hope implicates each of us. It reveals a secret that we sometimes harbor, that each of us has agency. And that agency multiplied, collective action can mean raising up a new world. It can mean the opposite of the destruction of the Capitol on Wednesday. It is the senators returning to the site of desecration to count a vote. It's what happened in Georgia. It can mean civil rights and the freedom of slaves, women and Black people voting. It means healthcare and childcare and just old plain caring for all of us, for everyone, raising up those who have been stepped on, made invisible and devalued. The voice of hope issues an invitation. Listen, it says, you can stand up to this. Yeah, you. There is possibility here, right now, to remake this world, your world, the world, create new worlds. Tonight, let's together raise a cup of hope. Let's celebrate in anticipation of redemption. Because if we do believe that, we will act like it and help usher in that redemption, that birth. Let our sacred stories help us find hope, even in horror. Let's support each other, hold each other up, so we can manifest hope in the world, so we can save each other's lives, so we can save our own. Thank you.